Thanks, guys. Welcome into another roundtable. Bill Priestley here with Michael Vincent, Thomas Watson. We have more of a round structure. Trust me, we are getting a table. It's right. It's right over there.
It's the supply chain.
We just have it. Yeah, we're just going to be here shortly.
We're working on it.
Guys, let's talk a little bit. We're going to play a nice little game here of good idea, bad idea. In other words, I've got a few things that have happened in recent history, a few topics of discussion, and we'll go through these and just to talk about if these were good ideas or if these are bad ideas. And the first one, I think, is going to be central to everybody who's ever gone to a gas pump. Gas prices, we're hitting $4.60 a gallon. Nationwide at average, at least at this point. We've got news that 600,000 barrels are headed here from Europe to try and stem it a little bit. Good idea, bad idea. Government intervention in lowering gas prices for the average American. Good idea or bad idea?
It depends on what their intervention is, right? So I'm always going to say that when you say government intervention. I think our gas prices would probably be better if government didn't intervene previously with different regulations, et cetera, for refining and so on and so forth, right? And I think it's interesting that, we have this thing called the Jones Act, but every time we want things to run efficiently or help things out, we get rid of it. So there's, you might want to take a mental check mark there, right? Because there's talk about getting rid of that, right? So you can move oil up the East Coast a little bit more efficiently than the Colonial Pipeline because of backwardization, et cetera. But yeah, government intervention, I think, is needed right now. It's a slippery slope. I don't like intervention from the government, but we got to fix this problem right now.
I think it'd be a good idea. Energy security is national security. So when we're talking about the fact that the Northeast in the past 15 years lost half of their refining capacity is unacceptable, in my opinion. And the fact that our policymakers are focusing on short-term gains, I'm really glad my road is slightly nicer, but when we're having a situation coming out of a pandemic and the fact that other countries are able to use our geopolitical situation against us, I mean, those are additionally with the shale. We had the ability, but then, the free market in turn failed because the shale over-drilled, investors dried up, and ESG initiatives cut it back. So I think a good idea would be smart government policies that incentivize having ourselves in a situation where this doesn't happen again.
All right, moving on. Story that happened last week that's had some legs and has continued to get some traction on Freightwaves.com. Cisco buying 800 electric trucks over the course of the next 4 years. And I talked with Alan Adler a little bit about this. That's not going to be a significant portion of what their fleet's going to be, but it is a massive step in terms of the number of trucks that have been bought, electric trucks that have been bought recently, I think outpacing the next biggest buy by at least 8 times. Good idea or bad idea?
Yeah. I mean, it's excellent to move the technology forward. I'm not a huge proponent of electric vehicles. I mean, I think they're a move forward, but I'm not so sure they're the ones that win. I'm kind of in the camp with John Kingston, although he'll say absolutely not. They are not going to win. I'm on the fence with it, but I think it's a good move. It's a good move forward right now. I think it's a good idea to help a new technology come in, whether it's going to win or not. Not so sure it's going to win though.
I think, so it's between good or bad. Can I say maybe idea? Is that an acceptable one?
I guess that's kind of what I was trying to say.
I'm going to say 50-50.
I'll allow that.
Okay, we're going to maybe. I'm saying maybe because obviously the technology is not proven. So on one end, there is a huge financial risk. But on the other end, we saw with Covenant. I went down to Covenant. They had one day cab that was electric. People were lining up. From a persuasion standpoint, you told people you're buying 800 of the things. These companies that have all this ESG initiatives, they don't care about the cost. They'll put a diesel generator to literally pollute the atmosphere and charge that truck. I think chaotically, business style is a phenomenal idea in terms of persuasion, because if I'm a company and I'm putting in this order, it's allowing these other companies that are facing pressure. It's kind of like a Tesla. You're buying a proof of concept.
I love that you brought up Tesla too, because one of the problems with this idea is if you're doing it for that persuasion and for that ESG and your CSR, not to use any acronyms or anything like that, but if you are, it doesn't work. Tesla was just removed from the ESG index.
Yeah.
Moving on, number 3, let's go to California, where they are going to phase out drayage trucks that have engines that were originated from 2007 to 2009. In other words, at the end of this year, you can't run a truck that has an engine that was made in those years. You have to upgrade, so to speak, in having your drayage truck use a much more modern engine. And in that fact, you also have drayage truckers now having to look at buying new trucks. This is all an initiative to try and cut carbon emissions by percentages, I believe, by 2030. Good idea, bad idea to start removing these trucks that are, at this point, between 13 and 15 years old?
Horrible, atrocious idea.
This is also, let me also stipulate, this is also would be a drop of, depending on how you look at it and how the numbers shake out, a drop of between 20 and 26% of trucks, drayage trucks in California.
So this is how I see the current situation. We have a backlog at the ports, we have labor negotiations coming up, and then we also have a problem with drayage capacity moving these containers for the backlog. So what do we want to do? Let's get rid of 20 to 25% of our drayage capacity for CARB compliance rules. How about instead, if I'm the state of California, I reopen the nuclear power plants that we shut down, and let's work on actually more. Gen 4 is actually up and coming as well. It can reuse materials. You know, there's so many other ways for us to meet these guidelines. They actually had to do a public PR effort to save their one power plant left that was with nuclear fuel. You can't tell me that I want to get rid of a bunch of trucks and then I don't have any other solutions towards trying to meet these goals. I don't think hobnobbing our supply chain, absolutely atrocious. Now, should we incentivize drivers through rebates and other ways to get these vehicles? By all means, but you want to incentivize them. You don't want to like throw the hammer at them and then wonder why. Because here's what will happen: people are incentivized. If I'm every other East Coast port right now, I'm going to be laughing myself to the bank because I'm going to dredge my harbors as much as I can, and these other ships and container ships will start finding other locations if they can't get their stuff unloaded. So I vote big, horrible, no.
Mr. Vincent, do you agree?
Yeah, I do agree. I do agree with Thomas, and he brings up a lot of really, really good points that I could reiterate. But it is simply put to what he said. The ends I applaud. The means not so much. And you're right. It incentivizes people to not do business in those ports and to move as it goes on. Now, I also applaud California for a lot of their drive, because a lot of the things that they put forth and set into law and set into motion actually drive innovation forward, right? Which is a good thing. But the method to make it happen, not so great.
Well, you know, they lead the nation in a lot of ways in terms of environmental policies.
Yes,
and it's important to acknowledge that.
And that's all I'm doing, right?
Yeah.
And some of it has unintended consequences.
And that's what we're seeing right now. Even with some of their zoning and other things, LA was devised as the world's first car-related city almost. It's got the urban sprawl. And so instead of targeting drayage and the supply chain, why don't we work on our zoning, work on making sure that we can have different things and then have the infrastructure overall to better support it.
Yeah.
Quickly, let's move on to a subject of a lighter note. I saw this particular recipe in a 1933 cookbook, and you guys are doing it, What the Truck, a potato salad challenge. This came out of a church cookbook just to check and see if eggs were part of the recipe, and sure enough, there they are on the lower left.
God intended eggs to be in potato salad.
Please ignore the chopped frankfurters on the right.
Yeah,
nevertheless,
that was a mistake. That was
nevertheless, good idea, bad idea. Eggs in potato salad, Michael Vincent.
No, you know where I lie. I'm with God. See, it's right there. Right there. I'm going to align myself with the almighty. Eggs in potato salad, and just about everybody else in the South.
So frankfurters too?
No,
okay, all right.
Next to the salad.
Eggs?
That was a typo.
I'm going to go with that. Yeah, eggs are great. Hard-boiled eggs don't really detract from the salad. And the fact is, you don't want it to sit out too much. The least of your worries is a hard-boiled egg.
That's right. The mayonnaise is going to
The
get you.
mayonnaise is going to get you. So the egg is irrelevant to the mayonnaise threat.
All right, so let's move on to our last one, and this is kind of the big one that I wanted to get to. And we talked about the letter that the 5 senators sent to carriers as well as rail companies concerning safety standards and what information they want to get along those lines. I got a little curious yesterday and actually wrote the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms asking about what safety standards, what regulations are in place, and this is the response that I got. And which basically says, and if you read down there are no security standards required by ATF across the board. And again, that is dealing with basically any kind of firearm to have any security on it in transit whatsoever. They also have recommendations, obviously, for keeping them, for storing them, for preparing them to be sold by the FFLs. But in transit, there are no security standards required by the ATF. Question: should there be, noting that there have been these gun thefts where gangs or just people have decided to attack a train or in a rail yard, and because they perhaps have a perception that the guns are going to be on there. Do you think there should be government intervention, or at least government oversight, in the protection of the supply of guns as they should go to their rightful owners or rightful destination?
Well, I mean, didn't they do that once? I remember just a few years back they were overseeing the supply of guns to the cartels.
Apparently well, okay, all right, there you go.
They're actually sending them to them?
That's right.
I mean, there's my sentiment.
But
isn't the ATF really just, they're an enforcement arm, right? So there aren't anything that they require. They just enforce requirements
they recommend
by the government, right? And they recommend certain things to stay within those requirements.
Question being,
right?
would you like there to be more security standards around firearms being transported by rail and by truck?
I don't think that there's a need for that. I haven't seen anything where it is such a. I think that if we enforce the laws that are already there in a consistent manner, then we're in good shape, in my opinion.
Sure.
That's a real tough one.
Yeah, it is.
I'm going to say federal regulations on the transport of firearms. I would say that if there's not reevaluate the ones we have right now. The problem is things are getting stolen. If it's a firearm or a fancy cell phone, the incentive's there, the motive's there, it's happening. And so why target, I support any regulation that's smart enough to target this and make sure it doesn't happen, but currently it feels like our policymakers have failed us if people are still, stealing a bunch of guns. So
we're not even enforcing the stuff they have in place.
How about could we go with a good idea if we review what we have and make sure that we remove the incentives for doing so? Because I think that would be a smarter one. Or we can just put people like the old Conestoga wagons and have someone ride shotgun with a shotgun on the train. If that's how it's going to be, then why not?
As long as it's not loaded.
We are dealing with the standards of the Wild Wild West here in 2022. That's going to do it for our roundtable. We'll take a break and come back and wrap up our show after this.